Hi guys, welcome to another episode of Clangin and Bangin with Mikey, episode 291. And today what I want to talk about in this particular episode, in this particular podcast episode is admitting that it's okay to make a mistake, man. This is more towards the women than the men because most of us men, we don't have a problem admitting to when we're wrong. Most of us men are, willing to take accountability for certain things in a situation, and we're always, and I can only speak for myself and the people that I consider my friends around me, when it comes to holding people accountable, right? And like that's the part that most people don't want to deal with because that involves them admitting to when they were wrong. Um, and it goes back to um, my ex telling me about a situation when she was married to her ex-husband, and the guy said like, and he said like, oh, like, like you never apologize for, for being wrong in X, Y, and Z, you know, and I remember she said something. She's like, well, like I apologize, like when I am wrong. I'm like, and I'm like, no, that's not what he was saying. It was like what he was saying was that like you never take ownership in the situations that you put yourself in. It's like you never want to take accountability for anything, and it's like that's not a good trait to have, bro. It's like, you know, like you can't sit there and blame somebody else for your lack of emotional, maturity. And to me, I've always felt that was weird because when women say that shit, like, oh, I apologize when I was wrong, like when I'm wrong. And I'm like, what that translates into is I apologize when I think I'm wrong, not when I know I'm wrong, because if you think you're wrong, yeah, like, okay, like you're going to apologize. It's like, I've been in situations, with girls and be like, oh, well, are you going to apologize? No. Why? Because I don't have to. I don't have to apologize for me saying how I feel. I don't have to apologize for being transparent. I don't have to apologize for me bringing up facts into a situation that explains your behavior and how it affected me, right? And I think that's where a lot of people get fucked up at because they want to sit there and like, oh yeah, X, Y, and Z, yada yada yada. But I'm like, no, like it's like it is what it is, and like it sucks, but that's just the situation that we're in. And I think that's where a lot of women get it screwed up at is like, and how they lose good men. And when I say lose good men, I don't mean the guys who are just, rollovers, do whatever you tell them to do, X, Y, and Z. But no, it's like you lose good people by not respecting them. And it's like, or if you're constantly draining them, or if you're constantly accusing them of doing X, Y, and Z, or if you say hurtful shit, because I've had people tell me like, oh, like we were never in a relationship, X, Y, and Z, yada yada yada, and like you go back and you look at the text messages and you look at the shit that they were doing, and I'm like, how do you sit there and bullshit yourself like that? How do you sit there and lie to yourself when it's clear that it was definitely a relationship? You know, so, and I think that's the most weirdest thing where people will do that shit and then like they'll sit there and play victim. I'm like, but you can't play victim in a situation that you perpetrated, a situation that you carried, a situation that you created. And another thing too is like maybe it's me and like me getting older and whatnot, but it's like everybody around me is getting divorced. And I recently saw this Instagram story where this person I know, she was saying like I'm learning X, Y, and Z, to like not force things, to accept them for what they are, yada yada yada. And she's talking about her divorce, right? And I said like you can't ignore the writing on the wall. It's probably been there for a while, and you just gotta thank them for the lessons, and you gotta thank them for the time. And it's like not only remember the bad times, but remember the good times as well, because every relationship does run its course, you know. Friendship, romantic relationship, it doesn't matter. Um, I've been in situations or relationships with girls that, you know, they say like, oh well, like, you know, I don't mind texting, you know, texting back and forth with you, but you know, but we're acquaintances, right? And so they try to pull a me on me, and I'm like, what makes you think I want to text with somebody back and forth that I consider an acquaintance? An acquaintance doesn't have, you know, each other's phone numbers. Acquaintance doesn't do X, Y, and Z. You know, acquaintances don't check up on people, right? You know, and when I say hurt people, you know, and it's not necessarily what you did, you know, it could be what they're going through, it could be the situation that they can't handle. I've literally had girls tell me like, oh, like my life is always chaos. I'm like, well, maybe you should probably start looking within, because if your life is always chaos, it means it probably starts with you, you know, and if that's the case, then you might need to go to therapy and get your shit figured out, because it's like you don't want to be that person that is always ends up in the same similar situation with the same type of outcome. And it's like you don't want to be that individual, regardless of what people tell you. It's like that's not a good look. And I hate it when women blame the men for X, Y, and Z, and I'm like, especially when they have kids by them too, and I'm like, okay, so you had a kid or multiple kids by this individual, but yet you're calling him a bum, you're calling him a loser, X, Y, and Z, and it's like, don't you realize it takes two people? So where's their responsibility in this situation? Like, why didn't you see the signs before that, you know? Like, I was talking to this one cat on social media, and he was posting something about like how women will play you, and use dark psychology, which is a real thing. Um, and he was saying like, oh yeah, you know, like she told me that I wasn't a man for her, yada yada yada, whoop de whoop. And this is after I drove eight, you know, I drove 8 miles, you know, to get to her because X, Y, and Z. And I'm like, bro, it's like, how do you not recognize the signs? How do you not recognize the fact that this woman with you didn't want nothing to do with you, you know, didn't see you the way that you saw her, and X, Y, and Z? And why would you drive 8 hours to to find that out? You know, most guys would know that by now. So he responded and he said like, oh well, like, you know, well yeah, and he goes, well, in retrospect, I should have seen the signs, but it's like, you know, she helped me plan the weekend, like she told me her availability, set up the schedule, the whole nine. I'm like, but in reality, you know when shit's not working out. You know when it's not meant to be. You know when it's a dead end situation, because you do. And that's not something that people should take lightly. That's not something that people should downplay. It's like I got this coworker of mine, you know, or this person I used to work with, I should say. They have a really, really bad habit of every relationship that this person gets into, they get cheated on. I'm like, yo, it's like, you really can't sit there and blame the other individual. It's like, you got to start looking at yourself. And they're like, what you mean? I was like, if you've been in 3 or 4 relationships and they've all ended the same way, with the other person cheating on you, and then the other person is telling you that they've cheated on you, what does that what does that say about you? Not much. Or it's like, I've seen people in relationships where, like, you know, they're 6, 7, 8 years deep, and they're talking about, well, like, I have a fear of commitment. What the fuck are you talking about? You're in a relationship with a dude that, you know, that's 6, 7, 8, 9 years deep. Like, what do you mean? Yeah, it doesn't make any sense. And then you got the ones, you know, the guys who cheat. And I don't condone cheating. I think cheating is deplorable, but I understand why some guys cheat. You know, I get it. You know, I don't rock with it though, but I understand it. You know, and some guys cheat for a plethora of different reasons. You know, and it's not, you know, it's, and whatever reasons they come up with is like, it's whatever helps them sleep better at night. But my thing is simply this: is like, you don't ruin somebody else's life or the outlook on love because because you're tired, right? I've been accused of cheating on people. I've been accused of, you know, having multiple girlfriends at the same time, which I'm flattered that people think I have that much game. I really am. I don't know why people think that, but okay, you know. Um, and I think that's the most interesting thing, man. Is like when people start accusing you, and there's no proof, there's no evidence of you doing anything like that, and it's like, yo, it's like if you really didn't want to be with me, we could have had that conversation. Like, there's no reason for us to sit here and be like, oh yeah, X, Y, and Z, yada yada yada, whoop de whoop, and it's like, oh, it's cool. You know, I don't look at you as a bad person. I don't look at you as something that's like, oh my God, X, Y, and Z, and I'm like, no, like it's okay, mom. You know, like I don't get upset. I don't get mad. I just look at the situation for what it is. I don't have the energy of the time, you know, to to deal with somebody else's insecurities. I really don't. And I'm at the age where it's like, yeah, don't do I want to get married? Yeah. Do I want to have kids? No. You know, as great as kids are, and I love kids to death, you know, me personally, I just can't see myself at 37, 38 having a kid, and it's like, bro, I'm gonna be responsible for this kid for the next him or her for the next 18 years of my life. By the time they get out the house, I'm gonna be in my mid 50s, you know? And I don't know, man. It's like I think like I said, I think kids are great. I mean, but it's like if the problem is it's not the kids, it's that people who have kids with, you know, with people they haven't vetted. Or it's like I'll sit back and I'll listen to certain things, and even with my ex, you know, like I would sit there and I would listen, you know. I would just take it all in, and I'm like, yo, like she doesn't realize that she's a part of the problem, you know. She doesn't realize that, like, yo, it's like you're in the situation you're in because of all the kids you had by this guy, and it's like he wasn't helping you then. He's damn just not gonna help you now. So it's idiotic to sit there and think that he's gonna be an asset to you. He's gonna help you out financially now. Now that he's, you know, now that you guys are, you know, on the verge of finalizing it, you know, finalizing the paperwork and everything. And the way I look at it is like, be mindful of what you do, be careful with what you do, um, because you don't want to raise kids in a broken home. And I don't mean just financially. I mean emotionally, physically. You know, because kids can sense when that, you know, when that shit doesn't, you know, when it isn't working anymore. And like, I've I've grown up in a home where it's like, you know, my parents slept in separate bedrooms. You know, like I grew up in a home where they didn't talk. They yelled at each other. I grew up in a home where there was no communication directly to them. You know, so as I'm growing up, I'm thinking this shit is normal because this is what I see every day. And it didn't dawn on me that it wasn't normal until I was in my mid 20s when I was you know, when I was living in a different state, you know, for a little bit, and I saw how healthy couples interacted. I'm like, yo, this is this like my upbringing was bullshit. My upbringing, for lack of better words, was toxic as fuck. You know, my upbringing was basically a facade. You know, like, and I remember something. I'll never forget it. I probably gotta talk to my therapist about this too. But my dad told, I think he told one of his friends one day, and I must have been about 10 or 12 years old. And he was in his study back then, and I happened to walk by to grab some, and like my man never heard me, and he said like, yo, if it wasn't for my kids, you know, I probably would have divorced, you know, I probably would, you know, would have been divorced my wife. Mind you, this is, you know, 15 years in, 20 some odd years in, and like they were married for what, 31 years. So he felt that way. And I remember something after he died. We was cleaning out the garage, and like there was this old book. It was, and going through it, and it was a divorce book. It was steps on literally how to get divorced, like how to handle conflict and everything to it. It broke down everything, right? And I remember my mother telling me, because I was in my early 20s, I was still in college, and like she looked at the book and she laughed. I'm like, she's like, I wonder why he's got this, because we was fine before you guys came, meaning me and my brother. And I'm like, if you really think that, you have no idea who you married, huh? And she was like, what? Yeah, you have no idea who you married, because if you really think that you were fine, you're delusional. Mind you, I'm in my early 20s talking to my mother like this. And I think that's where, my directness comes from. Like me saying how I feel comes from that me being transparent. That's where that comes from. And it's like, at the end of the day, man, it's like sometimes you gotta call people out on this shit. Like I used to call my ex out on this shit all the time. And like, yo, it's like you sitting there thinking that that you can't do X, Y, and Z, but in reality you can. You're just so afraid to fucking fail that you don't want to do it. That's the difference. Because like, she would always talk about her goals and everything she wanted to do and all this other shit. And I'm like, okay, cool, then go off and do it. Go off and get it done. Why do you have to, why are you so concerned with X, Y, and Z? And it was interesting too, because she's been dancing hula for X amount of decades, right? And so she tore her meniscus, and this is way after we broke up. So she's telling me this shit, and I'm like, okay, but I didn't know how she tore her meniscus, because I ran into her in the gym, and she was telling me X, Y, and Z. And so I think she called me, or I called her, whatever it was. And so she's telling me X, Y, and Z, all this stuff is popping off in her life, and I'm like, okay, cool. And then she brings up the knee injury. I'm like, okay, but I still don't know how it happened. And so she told me. I'm like, okay. And then she's telling me how the physical therapist was telling her, like, and the physical therapist was like, she was like, yo, it was like, you gotta start from the bottom, and you gotta build your knee back up, because you literally tore a ligament, right? And like, she's so concerned with with people looking at her saying X, Y, and Z, and I'm like, bro, nobody gives a fuck. She was like, what? Nobody cares. If you think people care about what you have going on, you're fucking mistaken. Like, nobody cares. It's like everybody in that gym is basically doing their own thing. They're not sitting there thinking about you. They're not sitting there thinking about, oh my God, like she only has 25-pound plates on each side of the machine. Most guys don't give a fuck. And even I would be like, okay, cool. Like, I wouldn't say nothing because you told me if I seen you in the gym. And she was like, what? It's like, most people who do that shit is motherfuckers who ain't working out. They're not training, to get better. They're just people watching, people gossiping, right? And it's like, if you think people sit around and look at what you're doing, they're not, Like, if I'm fucking working out bicep next to you, and like I see you with a 10-pound weight, and I know that, for a fact you can do the 20s or the 25s, of course I'm gonna say something because I know you. I'm not gonna sit there and be like, oh, like, what the fuck? It's like, no. Or it's like, if we happen to be working on in the same vicinity, it doesn't matter who it is. And then somebody's lifting light, I'm like, yo, like, oh, you like everything good? Like you're not injured or nothing, right? Like, okay, nah. Then why you lifting what you lifting? Or like, even yesterday too, it was like I was my body was beat up and worn down from the week, and so I happened to be working out yesterday at my house. And I kind of did like a circuit. You know, I did some push-ups. You know, I did some military presses and whatnot. You know, I did some preacher curls, but it was mostly just you know the bar and some really lightweight and body weight. I mean, because I figure, okay, let me at least get something in so I can just feel good about the day. Right? Because on top of that too, I did a bunch of yard work too early in the day, so it wasn't like I was not being active. So but in the back of my mind, I looked at it like, yo, it's like, it's like, okay, but I don't understand how people put so much emphasis and so much thought into what other people are thinking. I don't get that. I've never understood that, you know, because at the end of the day, it really doesn't matter. Like, I don't care if like if you how much money you make or how much X, Y, and Z that you do. It really doesn't matter to me. It's like I've never been that type of dude. Hell, my ex made more money than me, significantly made more money than me, and she even told me herself. She's like, yo, like, I'm not with you because of X, Y, and Z. I'm with you because I like you as a person. You know, and so it's always crazy to me when guys or when guys and girls lead off with money, and I'm like, you really going to sit there and like lead off with money, then complain about how dudes are treating you? Like, make that make sense, man. Like, seriously, make it make sense. Like, understand that, you know, like how you conduct yourself, how you present yourself matters. It's like I've had girls, like it's happened to me, it's happened to my friends, whatever not, and it's like they come out the box leading with sex, and then like they get mad when every conversation is about that. I'm like, yo, it's like you came with that, you led with that, so how do you expect the other person to respect you when all you want is a fuck? And it's simple. You don't get to rewrite the story after you presented yourself that way, you know. And I think I was either on IG or TikTok or something, and like some girl was talking about how girls present themselves and how it matters, and how she's basically calling women up by saying like, you can't be promiscuous or act like you're promiscuous and then get treated like you're promiscuous and then complain about people treating you like you're promiscuous. She's like, if you leave with a certain way, and since I'm a dude, I'm gonna tell you straight up, it's like, I don't care what you do. If you let us hit within a week, 2 weeks, whatever it is, or if all you ever talk about is sexual type of shit, even when the conversation is trying to be normal, then that's all you order us. Like we're gonna place you in that category of, okay, like she's the type of dude, or like she's the type of girl that I can just call at 10:30 at night and she'll show up at 11 on a work night. I'm talking about it because I've done that. Or she's the type of girl that I can just do X, Y, and Z with, and she's not gonna complain until she gets tired of being treated that way. She's the type of girl that I don't have to spend any money on, that she'll roll through because I want her to. I'm talking about it because I've done that. She's the type of girl that will break her rules for me because I'm that nigga, and everybody else, who's around me has to wait their turn. Why? I'm talking about it because I've been that dude. And it's amazing to me how women don't understand that. I'm like, yo, it's like, you can't sit there and like present yourself as promiscuous, present yourself as this easy target, and then complain that all dudes just want to dump their loads in you, or like X, Y, and Z. Or it's like, what's crazy to me is like when girls say like, oh, I'm looking for a sugar daddy, this and this and that. I'm like, oh, like, and I'm like, your parents must be fucking proud of you because, like Like you really out there, just doing whatever for money, you know. And it's sad, bro. It really is. And I think that when a lot of people realize that, you know, because there's been girls I messed around in my 20s with, and I'm in my 30s. I like now they they've they've got a kid or kids or whatever not, and I'm like, yo, it's like, no, we're not cool, because why would I sit there and like do X, Y, and Z with you? I've already been there. And even though that was a decade, over a decade ago, I hate to break it to you, mom, but it's like that's what you always gonna be. You just gonna be a late night creep, you know, and that's what it is. And like honestly, there's nothing wrong with that. If that's what you want to do, how you want to move, that's fine. But it's like you don't get to rewrite the story because to fit your narrative. You know, it's the same thing with a relationship. It's like you can't cherry pick certain situations. You have to take everything into account. You have to take the good times, the bad times, what caused it to end, what caused it to break up, what caused it to disintegrate, and you got to take ownership of that, of that as well. And it's like there's gonna be certain shit that like breaks the camel back. And it was like, and it may not be shit that you did. It could be shit that she did, or the other person did. You know what I mean? It's like, because not every infraction is weighed the same. You know, I've had myself in situations where I've had girls dig up dirt on me. I've had girls accuse me of cheating. I've had girls in the process of trying to dig up dirt, they realize, oh shit, nothing's there. Oh shit, I just fucked up this relationship because I thought Mikey was two-timing on me, and the whole time I'm not, because the single version of me and the relationship version of me is two different versions of me. Like when I'm with you, relationship wise, nothing else has my attention. Of course, there's always going to be a pretty girl. There's always going to be somebody better looking. There's always going to be something like, damn, okay, but nothing's going to match up to what I got. Because if I wanted something else, I would go get something else. I would go get something else. And I think that's where a lot of people get messed up at, is like they think like, oh well, he's always like, well, because I've been accused of having a wandering eye, this and this, and I'm like, no, it's like anybody else. I appreciate a good looking, a good looking woman. Same thing as you women, but you always like you appreciate a good looking guy, or whatever it is. It's like, so at the end of the day, it's not about people being cheaters or whatnot. It's not about X, Y, and Z, and it's like, and it's about it's about being secure in yourself and like being emotionally mature, when dealing with people. There's like me and my therapist was talking about the difference between being transparent and being vulnerable. I was like, no. I was like, well, the definition, I told my therapist, the definition of transparency is bringing up facts and, and whatnot, and kind of leaving the emotions out of it. The vulnerability is bringing up facts plus your emotions, right? It's like a perfect example would be like, I'm gonna just use me and my ex as an example. Hey, babe, transparency, right? I don't like it when you yell at me. Please don't do that again. That's just stating a fact, right? The vulnerability is like, same thing. Hey, babe, please don't yell at me. I don't like it when you do it. It makes me feel X, Y, and Z. It makes me feel whatever adjective, noun, verb that you want to use, right? Oh, I mean, noun and adjective, right? That's the difference. Having the ability to be emotionally mature enough to basically tell somebody like, yo, like how you conduct yourself makes me feel a certain way. How you do certain things makes me feel a certain way. And I think that's where a lot of people are like they want to sit there and be like, oh, well, X, Y, and Z, yada, yada, yada. And I'm like, no, like I used to have a former friend of mine who used to do the same shit. Like she would constantly disregard other people's emotions and their feelings. I'm like, yo, it's like, and you wonder why you're in the situations you're in. Like, nobody does that, bro. Like, straight up, nobody does that, you know. And I think that's the most crazy thing is because you can't sit there and downplay somebody else's feelings and emotions because they're not, like they're not important to you, right? Um, last thing I want to say, I remember this one girl I know. I think she's a doctor now. Anyway, back when she was finishing up her bachelor's degree and she was starting medical school, and she had this really bad habit of hooking up with dudes, you know, because she was a lover girl. She was a lover girl too, and like she was so naive, sweetest girl ever. You know, she was so naive on how dudes moved and everything too. It was like, uh, pretty much guys would just hit it and quit it and they would ghost her, right? And I told her like, look, I told her like, look, there's nothing wrong with being a lover girl. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that. But after a certain point in time, you have to take responsibility and accountability for your role in the situation. There's no way that you can be in this many relationships with people. There's no way that you can get, and there's no way that you can just end up in these situations and end up with you in the sack with with these dudes and not know what's going on. You can't blame everybody. You can't sit there and play victim. At a certain point in time, you have to take responsibility for your role in this shit. And I'm not saying that it's your fault. I'm not saying that. But what I am saying is it's simple. Be better at reading the signs. Be better at understanding people and how they move. Just because you're a good person doesn't mean the people that you're dealing with have the same mental fortitude, the same moral compass that you do, because they don't. And at the end of the day, you have to be smarter than what than what you currently are to avoid these situations. And me being 37, I look at certain things differently. I don't play with people's emotions. I tell them exactly what I want, and if they're not rocking with that, that's fine. You know, I don't. It's not my job to sit there and hold your hand, help you figure things out. You know, it's not. And at the end of the day, it is what it is. And I think the more people figure that out, the more people realize that, like, yo, it's up to us to basically make ourselves more aware of what's really going on, versus is like just putting ourselves in the same situations over and over and over again. Like, take some accountability, take some ownership, you know. And it goes back to what I said in the very beginning. It's like you have to be willing to, to apologize and take accountability, you know, in the role, of your role in that situation. Like, you don't get better by just dumping people and going off and getting a new resource and having that, and having the same thing happen. Or it's like this one cat I follow on social media, and he said, like, yo, he was like, yo, it's like you never get the same version of somebody twice. And that's true. A lot of women want to sit there and say, oh, men ain't shit, this and this and that. I'm like, no, the niggas that you picked ain't shit. But I'm pretty sure there's a dude that you overlooked because homeboy was corny, homeboy was this, homeboy was that. I was watching his reel last night, and this guy that I follow, he goes around certain cities and asks people like, oh, X, Y, and Z, are you guys couples, this and this and that? And if they say yes, whatever it is, okay, cool. And so, like they do the whole spiel and everything too. And this one couple, they've been together. I think he said 42 years. And the wife was saying like, yo, like, well, like, he was a complete nerd. He wasn't my type and everything too. And then she said like, oh well, like she said that that he was safe. And a lot of people took that as a negative connotext. I'm like, and I thought about it like, yo, like if you were together 40 some odd years ago, growing up in the Bronx or growing up in Harlem, I think, no, my bad, they're from Harlem. You gotta remember, 40 years ago was the height of the crack epidemic in New York City, you know? And if you're in high school, you know, all you're around is drug dealers and gangbangs. So when she said that, he was the safe option, meaning that bro wasn't doing none of that shit that he was, that everybody else around him was doing. And the fact that he was different too. So when a woman calls you safe, it doesn't necessarily mean, oh yeah, it's because he's a safe option. No. When a woman calls you safe, that means she's able to be herself around you. She doesn't have to have her guard up. She doesn't have to be living in her masculine energy. And so at the end of the day, it's just that, bro. It's like, find people that make you want to feel safe. That make you want to voluntarily drop your walls. Because you can't walk around with that fucking wall up and with the armor up and thinking that everything's okay when it's not. And I think that's where a lot of people get it screwed up at. They don't understand that it's not it's not something that you have to, like, we're not meant to be, like, number one, we're not meant to be alone, and number two, we're not meant, women aren't meant to walk around in their masculine energy 24/7. Because when I'm dealing with a certain woman, I'm like, and I like, they're loud, they're boastful, this and this and that. I just simply ask, like, mama, who broke your heart? Who got you living in your masculine energy, huh? What's going on? Talk to me. And I said exactly like that. Bro, when I tell you when I tell you those walls drop, they come tumbling down, like the walls of Jericho, bro. Anyway, y'all, this is about 38 minutes of your life that y'all won't get back. Hope y'all keeping it full peace, private player, positive pushing. I'll see y'all next week. I love y'all. And like I always say, know your worth because you're better than what you are. All right, y'all. Have a beautiful Sunday. I'll see y'all next week. I love y'all. Peace.